Hey, I can't wait to go over this brand new article that just came out. I mean, this is really, no pun intended, this is mind blowing, right? Because what have we all been saying for the past 10 to 12 years? That hearing loss significantly increases the risk of cognitive decline and dementia. But, 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 a new study just came out of the Mayo Clinic that might seem to say the exact opposite. So what are we supposed to do here, right? Are we supposed to completely change how we think about hearing loss, cognitive decline, and dementia? Or should we dive into the details and see if this paper is actually measuring what it says it is? All right, so let's go ahead and dive right in, okay? So look, see right here from the title, right? Association between hearing loss and development of dementia using formal behavioral audiometric testing within the Mayo Clinic study of aging, a prospective population-based study, right? So this is great. By the way, this is hot off the presses, November 2022, came out of Mayo. I mean, perfectly legit. I love the data that's in here. But I think they might have gone a little bit too far in what the data actually says, which is why it's important to have such a critical eye when reading these papers, right? So I'm going to just jump right to it, okay? Come right down here to the interpretation with me, okay? I'm actually going to go ahead. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. In this prospective population-based study, all right? I'm going to just fast forward. I'm going to skip this sentence here. In the prospective population-based study, whereas objective measures on formal behavioral audiometry were predictive of poorer performance on cognitive testing over time, but not the development of dementia. So this is, I mean, this is incredibly different from what we've seen from different labs across the globe telling us that hearing loss significantly increases, and the degree of hearing loss is the most significant indicator for future development of cognitive decline and dementia. This is saying it definitely impacts cognitive function, but does not lead to dementia. Now, whoa, okay? We got to dive in. We got to look at what's going on here, right? For starters, right? This can't be ignored here. Look at this. 1,200 eligible participants. I love that sample size. The mean age of enrollment was 79 years old. Hello, right? You're telling me that you have patients that are near 80 years old that have normal cognitive function. Well, guess what? If you make it to that age, the chances of you developing dementia are like, they're different, right? What have the other studies told us from Johns Hopkins? They've looked at subjects that were in their 50s and their 60s, and then they monitored them for years and they followed. So for starters, number one, the age difference is huge. And look, I'm not saying that the finding here is wrong, but it does not contrast the prior studies. It's a completely different sample set. It's a completely different age, okay? If you've made it this far without cognitive decline, you can't compare that to a younger group that goes on to develop it. So there's number one. All right. Number two, they only followed up with their subjects for 7 years. That doesn't make sense, right? In the prior studies, they looked out to 19 years. They look 5, 10, 12 years longer than this. You really need to follow these patients for a very long time, up to 2 decades, if you want to make a firm statement on whether or not they do or do not develop dementia, okay? So right there, the average age of the subject, the fact that they only followed up for 7 years, look, the data it is what it is, but it's not in contrast to what we know in our heart, to what we know, to what the evidence has pointed us to, that unequivocally untreated hearing loss significantly increases the risk of cognitive decline and dementia by as much as 200 to 500%, right? We can't forget that data. Now, look, with all that said, I think it's really important to note one thing that you absolutely unequivocally have to start thinking about in your practice and incorporate. I'm going to go back to the interpretation here. In this prospective population-based study, subjective informant-based hearing difficulties were associated with the development of dementia. What does that sentence say? That says when a loved one, when a significant other comes in and says, my spouse, my father, my brother is really struggling and I really notice it, that is a huge predictor of going on to develop cognitive decline and dementia, right? So there's just another reason of why it's so important to involve caregivers and loved one in the diagnostic assessment and treatment process, because their input matters. Look, after all, right, what is the definition of mild or major neurocognitive disorders like dementia, right? It's a change in learning, memory, behavior, personality relative to the way it used to be, right? And who's going to be able to pick up on that? A loved one, which is why it's so important that a loved one be involved to tell you, yes, things are different now than they were 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. There has been a significant change in their hearing. There has been a significant change in their behavior, in their memory. Those are very valid predictors regardless of age. So hopefully, you're able to better digest this Mayo Clinic study and understand it in the proper light, which does not argue against any of the past data out there, strongly indicating that hearing loss is significantly correlated to increased risk of cognitive decline and dementia.